Hello, and welcome to another conversation with Carl. As a reminder, before we get started, please like, follow, and subscribe. Today, we welcome Penne Restad, Distinguished Senior Lecturer Emerita at the Department of History at the University of Texas in Austin. Penny's expertise includes late 19th and 20th century American cultural and social history, history of American holidays and family rituals, and the history of the 20th century consumer culture. She's also the author of Christmas in America, A History. Welcome, Penne Restad, to the conversation.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
I'm so glad to have you, and this is such a, I guess, timely conversation to discuss the history of Christmas in America. What does Christmas mean to you?
It's pretty complicated for me. It probably is for actually a lot of people if they just think about it. It could be religious. It could be the pressures of getting those tree lights to work, which they don't, or any number of other things that could go wrong or could go right. I'd say it's a somewhat tense season, but I really enjoy it.
What's difference between the history of Christmas from 1870 to say today?
I think that somewhere around 1870, Christmas really kind of began to take off. It's after the Civil War, and there are a number of changes, sort of modernizing changes that are taking place. But maybe I'd target two or three places in particular. Uh, this is a city holiday, primarily large city holiday. It's celebrated, in homes and in small towns, surely throughout the United States, but in different ways, and there's not a consistency. But there starts to be a much more consistent sense about things. One thing I think that certainly helped is the beginnings of department stores. For instance, Wanamaker's in Philadelphia. All of a sudden, there are lights and plate glass and just a whole kind of creation of many, many goods and trying to promote the idea that you need to have these things. It's that create a desire. It's about that time too that American manufacturers start to create more things that we can consume in the nation. So there's a need to sell more things. There's also uh, a, between the end of the Civil War and World War One, the United States population nearly doubled, and much of that population growth had to do with immigrants from poor countries who are, people who are looking for another chance for something for a new start. And so there are many cultures and many, many languages that are pouring into the cities. And just to concentrate on New York City, for instance, which I think is kind of a microcosm of the big changes in the United States. So put those things in kind of layers and layer them on top of each other and think about a growing middle class, urban middle class with smaller families. And there is throughout that group some anxiety about all the changes that are happening to America. Uh, the pace is picking up, the intensity of commerce is picking up, the immigration, the sign of immigrants is everywhere. So there seem to be kind of a pressure to, or an inclination to create a nostalgic moment. And they focus that this is the middle class, and the upper middle classes focuses their nostalgia on their children. And so this is a good place for Santa Claus to enter in. So there are a lot of elements that all kind of come together and are pushed by American wealth, progress, immigration, just a longing for something that was simpler, calmer, as if it ever was. But there's that nostalgia.
I mean, that goes to your point. I mean, Santa Claus has got many names: St. Nicholas, Father Christmas, Santa Claus. How does it just become Santa Claus eventually in the US, or?
Yeah, he's that way. He's got many names. He's got Belsnickel and Santa Claus and lots of names. Largely German, Dutch, English, a little bit of French, Père Noël. But in the United States, I think that I would say the place that he starts to become known and would be as a St. Nicholas, but the outlines of the Santa Claus we know start with Clement Clark Moore's poem, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," went all through the house, and I won't go on. But He talks about a little old driver so lively and quick I knew it a moment. He must be Saint Nick. He's hearkening back to a Dutch Saint Nicholas from when New York was a Dutch colony, and I think that was over early 17th century. But there's that kind of built-in calling up a somewhat fake or contrived history that's set in a mythology. And then there's all these elements that we've got in our Christmas now. We've got stockings, we've got a Santa Claus coming down the chimney, we've got 8 tiny reindeer, got Ma in her kerchief and Pa in his cap. I see I'm gonna get through the poem anyway, just backwards. But
Yeah.
anyway, we've got all the makings for a really nice little domestic Christmas. So this poem is reprinted in a newspaper, and then newspapers pick it up because newspapers are looking for copy, and that gets circulated throughout the print world in the United States. So now we've got places that I've seen that they seem to be reading women, I would say, reading Godey's Ladies Magazine, which is the most widely circulated magazine in the United States, and they're reading about this Christmas custom and like, well, let's try it out at our house is kind of the way it seems to
Began.
kind of take shape. It's a little that's a little rough, but in general. So I would fast forward. So Santa Claus takes on lots of different shapes. We see him basically is either some secretive guy. Bill's Nichols got a furry coat and he's, and he's attended by this little character that's mean and evil and who will punish children. And then there are other places where there are images of him coming down the chimney or ready to come down the chimney, and he's just a little
Yeah.
guy. But if you fast forward to uh, well, 1870, 1880 is when I'd put it, is Thomas Nast, who's a famous illustrator for Harper's Weekly magazine. Thomas Nast gave us the images for the Republican and Democratic parties, the elephant and the donkey. And he also created kind of what I regard as kind of the official portrait of Santa Claus. And this man looks like fully 6 feet tall,
Yeah.
very robust, captain of industry sort of the character, the red suit. And if you look closely, it's almost like, look, it could be velvet, could be kind of furry, so kind of a reference maybe to an earlier version of a German Santa, but a red suit, which may be reminiscent of a bishop's robes from another tradition of Santa Claus, the Bishop of Myra. So there are all these kind of characters that kind of come together, and Nast imagines him as this person who is jolly. He's got a long stem pipe, or Thomas More's one had a little pipe clamped in his teeth, but this is a sign of his wealth. He's got abundance of toys, and he just seems to be an American Santa Claus.
So
And so,
where
yeah, so
yeah.
he kind of continues on until Coca-Cola advertising adopts him like in the early 1930s. He's basically the same Santa Claus we think about now. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, 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 that's great. That is like really that's fascinating to get the history of how we got here to today. One listener, Christian, wrote to me yesterday, where did the elves come from? How did we get elves in this story?
The elves. It's hard telling. I think that there are several things possible. I think that Louisa May Alcott, I think it was her, who wrote a story that had something to do with some elves somewhere. And then there's also in the late 19th century this kind of fascination with fairies and elves and little things. This is going to be like a lecture of extemporaneous, like, oh, I don't know, but this may be it. And I hope it doesn't take this long. But there is such a sense of kind of reality setting in with industry and growth and machinery and fast pace that there seems to be simultaneously going on a sense of magic and wonder. It's almost like a counteraction to what is taking place. So there are photographic images of fairies, for instance, that people have cited usually sitting on some flower somewhere with a dewdrop. So there's in the culture kind of a thought that there are little things that go on sight unseen and magical, but it is Thomas Nast again who invents the North Pole And then the North Pole needs some workers to make the toys. One reading of it is that there are so many immigrants in the United States and they're workers that maybe these elves are sort of like the immigrants and they're really good workers and they work well for Santa Claus and they produce everything on time. So this is the North Pole, the workshop is almost a metaphor for modern industry at its very best. Well
So,
organized, efficient, productive.
using the word to describe this, you use magical, and that's what this time is. Like, I'm in New York City, and I always think of this month after Santa Claus arrives at the end of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade,
Right.
and he arrives there. I think of that next month, this month, as magical in New York
Mhm.
City. You go down to Rockefeller Center, you see the tree, you walk down Fifth Avenue, you see all the
Right.
windows. This is a magical time, but
It
it's
is.
also, as you say, industry.
Right. I just find that Christmas brings together so many elements of the culture and in some ways tames them. They make
Yeah.
them palatable. Palatable. It makes them something that you want to embrace, something that you want to enter into and participate in. Uh, Anthropologists talk about reversals, times when people's roles are reversed. So in Old England, in merry Old England, I should say, um, that there was a custom apparently of the masters and the servants trading places at Christmas time, and the masters would serve the servants. And so there's this reversal. And it seems like Christmas takes on this sort of reversal when the children are the ones who are paid attention to, where the streets turn, as you said, magical, where gifts arrive from, Santa Claus doesn't take gifts away, he brings gifts to people. And there are all sorts of like opposites, things that are opposite happen. I mean, at least here, the big highway is Mopac, and I notice that people kind of slow down and let you cut in on Mopac even. There's a, there's a generosity in many places that you don't experience in the rest of the season. I mean, the rest of the year, I
Yeah, that
hope.
no, this month we're very nice to each other and we help people. But I also say, like, going back to the Christmas tree, it seems to me there's a lot of people that are not religious, but they do get a Christmas tree. They do participate in this
Right,
holiday.
right. They do get ugly sweaters with reindeer on them with flashing lights. Well, that's the thing about Christmas, I think, that makes it work. I guess that would be the gets it makes it so acceptable is that it can be read, it can be used by many people, and you just take out the parts that you want. So the Catholic Church, way back, in the 4th century, is struggling to get converts, but well, let me go even further back, that struggling to get converts, sitting in the middle of Rome, and Rome is participating in these pagan Saturnalias at December 25th, when the shortest day of the year. I mean, it's wild times. And the church says basically, go ahead, just do your wild times, but come to church. So there's a way in which the Catholic Church is accepting of some pagan elements in order for itself to survive, because it certainly is in a very much of a power position at that time. So one of the things we get is a big pagan symbol, which is a Christmas tree. It's not a Christian element, it's a pagan symbol, but it's been repurposed to serve Christmas.
Well, if
So
you look in Russia, what they call it the holiday tree.
yeah, and
Yeah.
or yeah, you could call it
Or
that, or like
New Year's tree, I think.
we could, you can make it whatever you want. Certainly, enough of us have Jewish friends. I've known them where, well, we always had a Christmas tree. When grandma and grandpa came over, we put it in the closet. That's sort of, in part, this is adapting to an American custom. It's American acculturation, and it doesn't carry religious significance. It carries holiday significance. It carries the idea that you belong to the culture. And so I know, lots of people celebrate Christmas and have never seen the inside of a church, or who may be Buddhist or Muslim or atheists, but it's what you take from it. This is a time to exchange gifts, or this is time to decorate the house. This is a time to cook food that's traditional, time for family to get together. You kind of pick and choose what you want out of the holiday. You either
It
spend a lot or you don't spend a lot, or you go to church or you don't go to church.
it
It's
goes
a
to
it's a
tradition.
it's a tradition. Christmas in America has got so many elements that you can pick and choose and still either celebrate or not celebrate Christmas, and it will look somewhat the same for everybody.
I mean, going back to your point, you write that Virginians hunted, danced, and feasted, and then that goes back to this point that you were trying to make before. So, how does that go from there, Virginians who are hunting, dancing, and feasting, to the Christmas of today?
There's this really interesting book that I like that Steve Nissenbaum wrote about Christmas in New York City. And the thing about Christmas is largely that it was wild times. In England, it was gambling and feasting and plays and just ridiculous over the top, terrible behavior. Well, terrible is a judgment, but it was wild times. And in the United States or the colonies, it was the same thing, and the Puritans are trying to tamp this down in New England, but they're having a hard time too because there are people who want to,
Gamble.
act out. Right, they want it that reversal that, get away from the work, let's have some fun. So, one of the things Clement Clark Moore, this is from Nissenbaum's interpretation, Clement Clark Moore, his estate was called Chelsea, so you get the idea of in New York City, he owned Chelsea. That was his estate, and he is having all sorts of trouble with people breaking things, breaking down his fences, destroying all sorts of things, because a lot of the people coming into New York in the early 19th century were young men, and they had these days off over this season, and they got drunk and disorderly. So he is really starting to promote this idea that you see in A Visit from St. Nicholas of a Santa Claus who is a tamed Santa Claus. He sets Christmas in a home. He is probably a peddler, and those are always suspicious characters. And, they travel around and you can't really trust them. But this peddler just opening his sack is bringing in the goods. He's not stealing from the house. And so it's almost he's made a story about wouldn't it be nice if everything were much more orderly? And from that, we see the middle class is starting to adopt this idea. And increasingly, as America becomes more attuned to the importance of work, 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 that you want to get the workers in line and orderly. And so this idea of domesticating Christmas, which really starts to be pretty apparent in the 80s, 30s, and 40s, that becomes a reasonable
Yeah.
holiday to celebrate.
Well, one of the things you do on Christmas, watch movies. And there are a lot of movies. The Hallmark Channel has
Mhm.
made a lot of movies. I know you're talking about takes place in New York is the big thing, but if you watch a Hallmark movie, it's some little town far away
Uh-huh.
from here
Yes.
where they find love. Or we watch Home Alone
Yeah.
would be another holiday
An
movie.
abandoned child, good
Child.
movie, yeah. Okay.
Yes, and then the big discussion that everyone always has is Die Hard, a Christmas movie, you know,
Uh-huh.
with Bruce Willis.
But
Is it? Yeah,
it has a Christmas tree in it,
it
so it
does.
must be. Yeah, it
Yeah.
must be.
So so how does movies play into this culture today?
Well, I think in the same way that newspapers played into the culture in the 19th century, and then into the 20th century, and then television, and then visual, the movies that's the way we as a culture teach the culture about ourselves. And there is within those many of those movies, I haven't watched Die Hard honestly for quite a while, but there's nostalgia. It's a wonderful life. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. There's a longing and can we go back to an earlier time and can we imagine it looking like we think it should with snow? And, so you dream of a white Christmas and you're never going to see it. You might, in the South, but probably not even in New England. But there's a nostalgia that we can live through in those movies. And I think the movies just tell us about ourselves. and where we are. So I take a wild guess and say Die Hard tells us something about violence in America. Gee, I shouldn't have
Yeah.
gone there, but might tell us something about violence in America and also when the good guys finally win out. So it turns out well.
Okay. So it becomes it's a Christmas movie.
Yeah, I'm not gonna stand by that, but, there is that way in which if movies are reflecting our culture, that's one of the ways we get there.
Is does each generation redefine Christmas?
Yes, but there are themes that run through it. The
Okay.
same themes run through it, that there are children in it, there's gift giving, there's generosity of some, quite often charity. We've got to kind of figure in, although he's not American, The Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens' story about Scrooge, who fits really well into an American system in which the rich are getting very rich by the late 19th century. So there are these themes that have to do with family and children and gift giving. But yeah, we do reinvent it. I mean, certainly one thing I think about is Amazon, what Amazon has done to Christmas. You don't go out and just I I actually went downtown looking for Christmas lights last week. Normally, I would say normally like 50 years ago, you'd go downtown and you'd see the lights and you'd see the windows decorated and it would be kind of a communal, there'd be an atmosphere about that the people have come out into the city and they're shopping and enjoying the lights. Amazon sort of wrecked that. Well, I think it was wrecked by other things before, so I won't put it all on Amazon, but we just bring it to our door. Walmart brings it to our door. Target brings it to our door. And so that some of the sense of community is gone. And so when you mention movies that you watch, I think a lot of families watch movies, Christmas movies, as a ritual. So you
Yeah.
watch, yeah, what's the one with the stocking? The stocking lamp? I can't remember.
The
You know what
Christmas
A
Carol?
Christmas Story. No, A
The
Christmas
Christmas Story.
Story.
The Christmas Story,
Where
that's
he
what I
wants
meant.
the BB gun. He wants the BB gun, but I know families that watch that every single year. They can recite lines, but it's a ritual that has to do with the family more than it has to do with the movie. But the movie's that central point around which it all gathers.
How do you see Christmas looking 50 years from now? I
Oh,
know you're a historian, so you look back,
I
but
look back.
I know you look back, but what do we see as
And,
things evolve and as things are changing? Where do you see us going?
uh, I I really that idea of the future
Yeah.
I guess I'd have to rely on that idea of a through line that it continues to be there. I think the religious part becomes increasingly rigid. So in the public sphere, it's becoming much more rigid about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. But in the family too, about the way that we're going to observe Christmas as a religious holiday so that my neighbors celebrate religiously one way and the next neighbor celebrate religiously another way. Next neighbor doesn't celebrate in the same sort of adamant way. And I think probably right now, I would say we've become more fixed
Oh,
on
no.
what you'll accept and what you won't accept. I hope that's not the case.
Hello?
I look back and probably because it's Christmas with nostalgia and I'm trying to think if people could look back on this moment with nostalgia. So I think given that Christmas really hasn't changed in its imagery since the late 19th century, I would think that that imagery persists and we still would call on Santa and we still would pay attention to the children and we would still worry about gifts and find a tree or not find a tree if that's what our intention is. I would hope that that spirit of Christmas that we we experience at least from moment to moment, whether it's looking in a shop window or, waving to the neighbor, I hope that persists. Right now, I'm not really clear on it, but let's say I hope.
Yes, you hope. I mean, well, isn't that what the holiday's about?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right. And with good things and good sentiment.
And as we wrap up, is there anything else that I have forgotten to ask you that you want to add that we should touch on?
Oh, I have 5 hours of lecture. I'll spare you. No,
No, you
unless you've got a question,
no, I have
I'm good.
yeah. The whole point of the conversation with Carl has been to learn, and I feel like I've learned a whole lot about Christmas today. Do you want to plug anything before we go?
I don't
Yeah.
have a thing to plug.
Okay.
Merry
Well,
Christmas is what I have to plug.
no, that's great. Merry Christmas. You have your book, A Christmas in America History. You can get that where you get your books. Penne Restad, thank you so much for joining
Uh,
me. And thank you as well for joining me out there. And as
Thank
I
you
always
very
like to
much.
say, be safe. Until next time.